At 9:31 on Thursday morning, terror came to these quiet Manchester streets. A British man intent on taking the lives of British Jews at prayer. So what now and what next? Two rabbis in Manchester told us simply not enough has been done to protect their community.
Certainly there has been an unwillingness perhaps to address some of the things that we've seen on our streets, particularly around some of the language used around the marches.
The Prime Minister had told people to stay away from protests yesterday to avoid further pain. But on the streets in Manchester, in London too, crowds turned out to show support for Palestinians. Nearly 500 protesters were arrested. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is with us live this morning, only weeks into her new job. She'll tell us she wants more powers for police to deal with demonstrations. And the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, joins us for a vital few days ahead of her too, as the Conservative conference begins. And with us throughout the programme, Dame Penny Mordaunt, the former Defence Secretary, Ben Houchin, the Conservative Mayor of Teesside, and Labour's Lucy Powell, recently sacked from Keir Starmer's cabinet, but now wanting to be the party's deputy leader. Morning, and welcome to Salford. Let's start, as we always do on Sundays, with what is making the news. The Sunday Mirror's front page is devoted to a minute of silence yesterday at Old Trafford after the attack on the synagogue. Enough is enough, The Independent on Sunday quotes police after yesterday's protests. The Sunday Telegraph splashes with the Conservative leader's promise that she would deport 150,000 illegal migrants a year. The Sunday Times has a scoop on the collapse of a trial of alleged spies for China. And Angela Rayner is out of the government, but she's not out of the spotlight. The Mail on Sunday leads with a story about her use of security. And here at the BBC, we're leading with the building hopes for the release of Israel's hostages. But let's focus in first on what we know about the deadly attack on the synagogue in Manchester. 2 people were killed. 3 are still in hospital after Jihad al-Shami's attack on British Jews worshipping on Thursday, Yom Kippur. It was the most holy day. He was shot dead by police who arrived 7 minutes after the first emergency call. They stopped him with gunfire, but it turned out their shots hit one of the victims too. The attack follows many months of warnings about rising racism against Jewish people, anti-Semitism. But there's been many months too of outrage over Israel's behaviour in Gaza. And that has brought thousands repeatedly onto the streets. But there's been concern that anger about that conflict has enabled a strand of hatred that's been visible in plain sight. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary both urged people to stay away from demonstrations this weekend. But some went ahead nonetheless. Now, among the Jewish community, there is anxiety and a sense of threat. But again, there are vexed questions posed to our politicians. How to balance fear and freedom of speech, and how to protect the majority from the extreme. Let's bring in our panel. Lucy, you're one of Manchester's own MPs. One thing we've heard from the community in the last couple of days, that this was shocking, but not surprising. Is that your view?
It is, unfortunately. I mean, this is an absolutely horrific attack on the Jewish community in Manchester, who have increasingly felt fearful, anxious, worried for their own safety. I've worked with them over many months and years about these issues, which we've seen hugely on the rise in recent months. And it's not just been at synagogues. I've dealt with issues at hospitals where people have been targeted, at schools, at care homes, and the rise of anti-Semitism and Jewish hate has been palpable, and it has caused deep anxiety and fear. And I think those words, enough is enough, are absolutely right at this moment. We've got to be clear with people that you cannot hold the Jewish community accountable for the actions of a foreign government. That is racist. That is simply wrong, and we need to be really clear about that, and they are not, it's not their responsibility at all.
Penny, you spent time actually studying this with a Labour politician, John Mann, and you produced a cross-party report not so long ago with a whole load of ideas about how to tackle this problem.
Yes, and in the next few weeks we're seeing the Home Secretary and Lisa Nandy about implementing our recommendations. We asked the Jewish community what things were most concerning to them, and protests did feature in the evidence we received. We can be in no doubt from the last few days the nature of some of these rallies and who is attending them. Some people attending them are violent anti-Semites who are stirring up hatred against the Jewish community, and everyone else is so self-absorbed they are oblivious to who they are standing next to and the fact they've taken vital police resource away from their fellow countrymen that really needed it this weekend. The Home Secretary needs to do more, and the Labour Mayor of London needs to back his Home Secretary and the Met Police. But the protest was secondary to the everyday experiences that Jewish people have in the workplace, at college, at school, and dealing with their trade unions. That's what our recommendations.
And we'll hear from a couple of rabbis a bit later in the programme. But Ben, for your party particularly, but for all politicians and for everybody watching, a lot of people who go in this march is thinking we are making a point about what the Israeli government is doing. We are not condoning the appalling behaviour of a small minority, and freedom of speech and freedom to protest is a fundamental right in this country.
It is, but it's this finely balance between are we facilitating a group of people like Palestinian Action and others who are prescribed organisations of themselves to be able to instill more fear into minority communities, of which we're talking about the Jewish community in this instance. I think I would go a step further and say that there is a core of people in this country who are leading a lot of these protests, and they're doing it to instill fear in certain communities, particularly the Jewish community. And I actually think many of the people who are alongside them in those protests are the useful idiots, and they can see that they're the useful idiots. I think we need to be much, much stronger, and the fact that you said that this is unsurprising, we're now talking about in retrospect. Something should have been done about this a long time ago. The Israeli community and the Jewish community have felt like this for years, and this was inevitable. What happened was inevitable.
Well, let's speak to the Home Secretary about it. We'll be back with all of you a bit later in the programme. Now, before we get to this, Home Secretary, can you tell us the very latest about the investigation? A number of people have been arrested. Have there been any charges, and how many people are still being held?
Well, there are 4 people that are currently in custody. The police investigation is taking place at pace. Of course, everybody knows the attacker himself was shot dead at the scene. But now there is intense work, obviously, to look into the planning and the preparation of this attack to establish the facts as to whether he was acting alone or with others. Those are still questions to be answered. 4 people are in custody. I think it's important we give the police investigation the chance to conclude.
Police have said openly, though, they believe that al-Shami may have been influenced by extreme Islamist ideology. Do you know that to be the case, and can you tell us any more?
Well, the police very quickly did declare this to be a terrorist incident, and it is our view at the moment that that is extremist ideology, that he was an Islamist in that sense, but we don't know more yet about the circumstances either of his own planning of the terror attack or who else might have been involved. All I can share at this point is 4 other people are currently in custody, and the police are working at pace on this investigation.
At the heart, of course, of all of this are 2 victims and their grieving families, Adrian Dolby and Melvin Kravitz. I just wonder, have you been able to speak to their families?
Yes, I've been able to send a message to the families that, of course, it's important that we respect the fact that they are grieving the loss of their loved ones. I came to Manchester as quickly as I could, straight after the attack took place, in order to spend time with the community here. I've been in contact with the community all over the country, as well as discussing these issues with the police in Manchester and nationally as well. And it is as part of those reflections that I've announced today that I'm going to be strengthening the legislation on protests in particular, and reviewing our wider laws as well.
And we'll come to that in just a second, but I just want to spend a few minutes talking about what's happened in the Jewish community. You've been here. Your colleague, the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, was also here, a vigil outside the synagogue. I just want to show people what happened when he was speaking on Friday.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Empty words. We want action.
Why do you think people reacted that way? You can see the anger, you can see the frustration and a sense of betrayal that the words have been empty from politicians.
Well, look, I was with David. We were both at that vigil together. As I say, I've been spending time up here in Manchester ever since the attack to talk to the community, to grieve with them and to reassure them as well. I absolutely understand the strength of feeling. We both heard that message loud and clear. It is why we've been reflecting on whether our current arrangements, particularly in relation to protests, because that has been
and we'll come to that in a second.
That's been raised
but I just wonder, do you think that anger among the Jewish community is justified? We went to the site of the synagogue yesterday. I spoke to 3 little boys who told me that every day when they go to school, one of their classmates arrived with something having happened. They might have been shouted at in the street. They might have had something thrown at them in the street. They might have been sprayed with something. This was the norm for those Jewish children in the United Kingdom in 2025. Is the anger of the Jewish community, for some of them, is it justified?
Yes, it's devastating. It's devastating to hear people who belong to our national community having these experiences. It's completely unacceptable.
But are they justified being angry at you?
Look, I fully accept that people are grieving, that they are upset, and they want more from their government. They are justified in asking for more from their government when they feel that they and their children are going to have to live smaller Jewish lives here in the country that is their home. This land is their land too, and they have every right to ask their government to do more.
But why haven't you got a grip of it thus far? Well, it's just been in plain sight. We've heard that from Lucy, we've heard that from Penny's report. You could have accepted her recommendations months ago.
Well, I will be meeting with Penny and John Mann and discussing their report and thinking through the changes that we will make in the future. We have already been providing funding for security for the community. Again, on one level, it's devastating that such security is required, but we have made that funding available. We work very closely with the Community Security Trust, and we are looking at the wider laws that we might want to change.
What extra things will you do right now to protect the Jewish community? You could right here, right now, accept all of Penny's recommendations, for example. It was debated in Parliament last year. This has all been, it's been sitting on a shelf.
Well, look, I'm going to engage openly with the discussion with Penny and John Mann. I think it's right that we reflect on what are the changes that are the right changes. The laws we make have to apply not just for one group of people, but for wider society as well. And the right balance has to be struck. What I'm acknowledging is that maybe that balance isn't in the right place at the moment. That is what I'm looking at straight away. It's why I've already made a decision on amending legislation relating to protests. But the government will return to the wider questions as well.
Will you have an inquiry into anti-Semitism, perhaps?
Well, I will consider, again, in conversation with colleagues and members of the community over the coming weeks and months, what is the best way to respond to that rising tide of anti-Semitism. I think there are some things we can do very quickly, and that is based around protests and amending and strengthening the legislation, which is a change I will make immediately, as well as reviewing the broader powers.
Let's then talk about that, because the problem of anti-Semitism has become more acute as the conflict in Gaza has continued. Now, you and the Prime Minister both said directly, very publicly to people, please stay away. You said it would be un-British to protest this weekend. And yet we saw on the streets in Manchester, in London, people came out anyway. There were many, many arrests. So how are you planning to curb these protests then? What are you going to do?
I'm specifically going to amend parts of the Public Order Act that will enable the police to place greater restrictions and conditions on protests based explicitly on what we call cumulative disruption. That is to say, regular protests by often the same group of people, often in the same place. So I want to make explicit in the law that those types of protests with cumulative disruption for communities can attract the same conditions and restrictions that apply to other types of protests, so that the police have absolute clarity that they can use cumulative disruption as a reason for restricting those protests.
And those protests in support of Gazans have been taking place regularly. They have been taking place often in the same sites in our city centres. So do you want to be candid about this and just say you are giving the police the power to ban those particular protests? That's the brass tacks of what you're saying.
So this is not about a ban, this is about restrictions and conditions that will enable the police to maybe put further time restrictions, move those protests to other places. The police already have powers on conditions for protests. What I will make clear in the law is cumulative disruption is in and of itself a reason to place restrictions.
But if
there will be protests that relate to the conflict in the Middle East that would now come into the purview of these changes, as other protests as well. So it is always an operational decision for the police to make, but what I'm being explicit about is they can take cumulative disruption into account.
So on the protests that people have seen week after week, some people have looked at them and thought, quite right, those are people standing up for Gazans. Some people have looked at them and thought, as we heard from our panel, actually, those have enabled some people to come out and express hatred towards Jews. What you are doing as the Home Secretary is giving police the powers to move those people on, to disrupt that pattern of regular protest.
What I'm allowing is for the police to be able to take cumulative disruption into account, and it is important, I think, that we make this change so that the right balance can be struck between allowing people the freedom to protest, which is an ancient freedom in this country, but balancing that against the rights of the wider community to be able to go about their business free from intimidation and fear.
The new Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, says it's offensive to ask people to stop joining pro-Palestinian marches. Is it not a dark step to limit the fundamental right to protest in a country that's founded on liberty and the right to say and think what you want?
Well, firstly, I don't think it's offensive to ask people to show a little humanity towards a community that has suffered such a terrible tragedy. That's the first loss of Jewish life, simply for being Jewish, on British soil in centuries, actually, as it happens. It's a very, very long time since that's happened in our country. And I think just because you have a freedom doesn't mean to say you have to use it at every moment of every day. Those people could have just waited a day or two and given people the chance to grieve and process what has happened.
But beyond this weekend,
I don't think there's anything offensive about that. I think that would have been a British response to what we've seen.
But beyond this weekend, what you are suggesting as Home Secretary is a response to limit particular protests that many people believe are part of their fundamental right to go and object to something they see in another part of the world that has horrified them.
Well, look, what we are doing is enabling the police to put more conditions and restrictions, so people will still be able to protest. But I think it is right that we look again at the balance that is being struck at the moment between that right to protest and also the wider rights of our communities as well. So it's always a balance, and I'm recognising that I think that balance has been not necessarily in the right place. I want to have more consistency of police practice when it comes to the conditions they put on these protests, and I have recognised that there is a gap in the law here. There is an inconsistency of practice, and that is why I want to make it absolutely explicit that cumulative disruption is a relevant factor for the police to take into account.
Do you feel remorse, I suppose, perhaps on behalf of the government, that it has taken what's happened this week for you to come to this conclusion?
Look, I am, of course, as devastated as anyone else at what has happened here in Manchester on Thursday. I feel tremendous grief for not just the people of our Jewish community, but for our national community as well. I am very worried about the state of community relations in our country. I know I, as the Home Secretary, have a responsibility to think about the action the government can take to strengthen our communities, to make sure people are well integrated into our society. That is a bigger piece of work for us to do, but I do recognise the sense of people feeling let down. I do recognise that people have been saying for a while that this was only a matter of time. It is devastating to hear our citizens say that, and I will ensure that the government response to what has happened meets the scale of the challenge that is being put to us.
Many people watching have had very deep concerns about Gaza. Many people in your party have had deep concerns about Gaza. You also have had deep concerns about what's happened in Gaza. Is it true you considered resigning the front bench because of the Labour Party's position on the conflict?
I don't think that my personal decisions here are what matter. I'm a member of the government. I was a member of the shadow front bench. I have supported our position.
But is it true?
I think,
I mean,
no,
I think it's not true.
No. I was a member of the shadow front bench. I am a member of this government. I accept collective responsibility. And what I can tell you is that every single day since we've been elected, literally the day after the election, this government has been putting its shoulder to the wheel, engaging actively from the Prime Minister directly in the difficult and very delicate work of diplomacy to try and bring about peace in the Middle East. Our long-term position has been that the only way to ensure the long-term safety and security of all of the people in Israel and all of the people of Palestine is a two-state solution. That is the thing that we have worked on every single day, and I fully support the government in those efforts. I'm a proud part of that government, and I do hope we are able to see a peace process in that region before long.
And these are all delicate issues, of course. There are so many things that we could talk about with you about, and it's your first interview on the show as Home Secretary, so we are running short of time. And if you forgive me asking if we could try and get some brief answers on a few different issues. The Conservatives are putting forward a much bolder plan than yours on immigration. They're saying that they would remove 150,000 illegal migrants a year. Why not follow their example?
I mean, you say bold and I say totally lacking in any credibility whatsoever. These are people that had 14 years to do something about these problems. In fact, these problems grew on their watch. In their last year in office, removals were through the floor. And since this government has been in power, we have increased removals of people from this country who have no right to be here. We've increased the number of foreign offenders being deported from this country as well. Frankly, I think the Tories need to explain why they failed over 14 years.
Well, we'll ask Kemi Badenoch about that in a few minutes.
Solutions that they never did a thing about when they were in government.
Okay, we'll ask Kemi Badenoch about that in a few minutes, but also be great if you come back soon and talk about your plans for migration. Viewers might remember we heard from a small number of academics who have places to come and study here in Gaza, who have been told they can't bring their children. Are you willing to look again at that? We're talking about maybe 20 children here. You could give them permission as Home Secretary to bring their families to this country. Will you do that?
I'm looking at the operation of that scheme as we speak. It'd be inappropriate to comment just before final decisions are made, but I am recognising that there is an ask that has been made there, and I'm considering the options that we might pursue.
OK, well, people will be interested to hear an update on that. There's a story in the Sunday Times today reporting that a case where parliamentary staffers were accused of spying for China collapsed days after Keir Starmer's national security advisor said Beijing would not be declared an enemy of Britain at the trial. Is that true?
No government minister has been involved in that decision. That was a decision for the independent Crown Prosecution Service.
And the question is not about a minister, it's about one of the Prime Minister's most senior officials.
I don't recognise that reporting about a meeting. I'm not aware of any such meeting taking place. It was a decision of the Crown Prosecution Services. They have made clear themselves an independent decision on whether to pursue with that prosecution. I'm very disappointed that that prosecution has not proceeded. Our understanding is that the evidence that was available to the Crown Prosecution Service when they brought the charges is not materially different to the evidence that they had just before the trial was due to get underway. So I think it's a question for the Prosecution Service to answer. But as the government, the Home Office, we very much wanted to see that trial proceed.
Is China an enemy of the UK?
China is a challenge, is I think the word that I would use. We've got a very hard-headed, realistic approach to the Chinese state. We've said that we'll collaborate where we need to. We will compete as well where our national interest demands it. But of course, there are some things that are a challenge between us, and we will meet that challenge too. OK, Home Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in Salford this morning. I know it's been a very busy few days, so we appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Now, in a few minutes, we'll hear from the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. It is a massive week for her and her party. But of course, in Manchester, many minds are still on the Jewish community, absorbing the reality of what happened, an attack on a holy place on a holy day. I met Rabbi Kath Vardy and Rabbi Josh Levy in a different part of Manchester to Heaton Park. And Rabbi Kath told me that as she was about to begin her Yom Kippur service in her synagogue, news emerged of what was happening.
We let the congregation know that this is what had happened. We let the congregation know that, the security was being increased, that the police were going to be around, but we also understood that people might decide they would prefer now to be at home. Everybody stayed. Everybody stayed. But I think, what's really important is that we recognise that this is a moment where we are both in shock and we're now going to need time, and we need to hold one another.
Certainly for many of us, it has felt like this has been a matter of, when, not if. And, we now have to think about what the consequences are and how we're going to respond together.
And what do you think the consequences are?
It isn't normal that you should have security outside a place of worship. And increasingly that is the reality for Jews. It is also beginning to be the reality also for some of our Muslim colleagues as well. Anti-Semitism has been allowed to develop and grow in this country, that it hasn't been addressed in the way that many people in the Jewish community have been asking for. And there is a level of discourse and rhetoric that needs to be responded to. Certainly there has been an unwillingness perhaps to address some of the things that we've seen on our streets, particularly around some of the language used around the marches.
Because the line between protesting and inciting hate sometimes feels quite narrow, doesn't it? It feels kind of quite thin. It's not about stopping people protesting what it is they consider to be wrong, but I think it is very much about ensuring that people take accountability and are responsible for the messages that they are that they're shouting very loudly sometimes.
What's it like for you to sit in the synagogue where you preach to your congregation every week and imagine that it could perhaps have been here?
So I think we probably sit in a double world, right? That we know that this is always a possibility, and yet we continue as if we are safe enough to continue, holding on to a sense of hope, holding on to a vision of the future, which is one where we can celebrate our diversity together and see that as richness as opposed to see that as detrimental. That's an incredibly important value. It's like oxygen to the soul.
Rabbi Kath Viner speaking to us there. Well, remember, as ever, we want to know what is on your mind on a Sunday morning. Email us kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or on social media you can use the hashtag #BBCLauraK, or you can even send us a message on WhatsApp these days. All mod cons. So back to our panel. Penny, you heard there the Home Secretary come up with this new idea to curb the powers of protest by giving the police extra conditions that they can apply to regular protests. Do you think that's workable?
Well, change the law by all means, but you also have to be prepared for the fact that the people attending these protests don't care about the law. And what the Home Secretary also has to recognise is that when people ignore the law, when you've said to someone you can't go along this route, you can't do these particular things, and they then go and do them, you have to be prepared to meet that. So this is also about police resource and enabling our police officers to do what we are asking them to do. The police have done a remarkable job. I mean, Whitehall last night was quite a sight to behold. They've done an incredible job here in Manchester, but also across the country. We need to support them, and that's why the Mayor of London in particular needs to step up and be more vocal on this. But this is going to be very difficult for the Labour Party. The recommendations that John and I are making are going to be difficult for the Labour Party. We're asking for particular things that the trade unions won't like, for example. In this country, you have to be a member of particular professional bodies and trade unions in order to get the indemnities to be a teacher or an independent social worker. Some of those organisations are openly anti-Semitic, and you can't ask people in this day and age to pay subs to an organisation in order to work in the profession that they want to.
Is that right, Lucy? Maybe Penny's just made quite an accusation that some trade unions and professional organisations are anti-Semitic.
Well, I don't know what evidence she's got for that. It's not something I recognise. But look, I think the focus on sort of protests is right and appropriate at this point in time. But actually, I want to see us going further, especially in the online space. I mean, you and I have talked about this in the past. The previous government, the Conservative government of which Penny was a part, massively watered down the Online Safety Act at the last minute. They took out all the sort of harmful but hateful content being in that. And the rise of anti-Semitism, as Penny and John's report shows, the rise in anti-Semitism online is phenomenal,
But
and the way in which things get shared and spread, the way the algorithms work, I want to see a much tougher regulatory regime around what's happening in the online space, and that has to be balanced with free speech, and the free speech is sort of say we can't regulate
but your colleagues
that
still
at all.
in the cabinet could have done that. You could have talked about doing that, and so far, after more than a year in office, Labour has had calls from various different charities, whether it's about anti-Semitism or child protection. Various different people have said you've got to toughen up the laws, and the government hasn't done it.
Well, no, we're only 15 months into government. There is a commitment to look again, I think, at the Online Safety Act, but I think that is, and the provisions of it have only just come into force. But yeah, I think we need to go a lot further and tougher in terms of that space. Yes, we've got this balance with free speech, but the right to free speech is not the right to spread hateful content, to spread mis and disinformation, conspiracy theories, tropes online, which then really do drive behaviour offline, and that's what I think we've seen in recent months, and we need to cut down on.
Let's stick with the protest though, because many people came out onto the streets yesterday, and over a period of time there have been thousands upon thousands of people for whom it's felt very important to go out and express themselves. And yesterday we went and spoke to some of the people who went on the protest in Manchester. This is what they told us.
I'm from Manchester. I was really upset about what happened. It's nothing that we condone. We don't agree with terrorism. We don't agree with anything like that.
We're trying to bring to attention what's happening, and Israel are the ones that have started all of this and are continuing it.
The implication behind their argument is that these are hate marches. They are not. I have, as a Jewish person, I've received nothing but love and respect on these marches, and I've been attending every week for 2 years.
Ben, there is a Jewish man for whom it has been important over the last year to come every week and say, I want to object to what is happening in the conflict between Israel and Gaza. As a Conservative, do you not agree that he has that right?
I think some of the examples you just gave that are an example of the useful idiots that we've seen who are supporting hateful marches where they are supporting Hamas, they're supporting Palestinian action. We saw, as you said, more than 500 arrests, so it's not a peaceful protest in any way, shape or form. And they're being used by these hateful organisations as useful idiots to allow this to continue. There's a lot going on behind the scenes here where there are organisations that are trying to drive dividing our communities across this country. And we talked, and you said it to the Home Secretary, there is a right to freedom of expression, there is a right to freedom of speech, and that includes the right to assemble and protest. But it's not an absolute right, in the same way I don't have an absolute right to walk down the street and enter somebody's private residence or to be able to steal something from somebody. There are qualifications, and people have been saying for years, and particularly to this government, with many ministers and MPs who have been out on these protests where a lot of these hateful things have been said, and they have not created the balance that we saw was coming. Again, it's unsurprising. We saw an absolute masterclass by the Home Secretary and arse covering from the Labour government, who have sided with these types of organisations. And we knew this was going to happen. We knew the attack was going to happen. It was somewhere in this country because of the way this government has allowed these hateful arguments to be able to progress.
Are you really branding the thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this country who have come out to protest and object to what they see on their TV screens of what's happening in Gaza? Are you saying they're all useful idiots?
Well, if we use the example of one of the Vox Pops, the people that started this problem were Hamas on October the 7th. It wasn't the Israelis. It wasn't the Israelis, was it? So even that is part of the misinformation that is seeping into our consciousness. It's seeping into the wider debate, and that allows and then facilitates and causes the attacks that happened in the last couple of days, because this misinformation is seeping through.
Penny, do you agree?
I think there are a lot of people who are clearly worried about what is happening in Gaza on these protests. But I'm sorry, if you have seen what has happened over the last few days, if you wanted to express your view, if you wanted to protest in that fashion, what you have done is taken away police resource, finite police resource, from where it was needed. On the Sabbath yesterday, that was for people going into their synagogues. That would have been a terribly frightening thing for them to do, with heightened tensions. People who were out maybe peacefully protesting about Gaza were facilitating that. And I'm sorry, we just need to say to our fellow countrymen, who I think, for many of them, their sentiments are very genuine on this issue, please just think about other people in your country. And to Lucy's point, the last government did crack down on certain protests. I mean, people gluing themselves to tube trains and stopping emergency vehicles because of the climate crisis. You don't have a right to disrupt people's lives, to stop emergency vehicles, and you certainly don't have a right to fuel hate.
Okay, I think there's going to be a very vigorous debate about this in the next few days, and I know there are many of our viewers who have strong views about their right to go out and object to what's happening in Gaza, but we must move on because we're about to talk to Kemi Badenoch, and to both of you as senior Conservatives. Ben, how important to you is it that the party starts to show it can pull its socks up and start to climb back?
Well, we've talked about it previously, haven't we, Laura, when I've been on the show that...
and you've not been a happy chappy.
No, I haven't. I think we needed to get our show on the road much sooner than we have. I think there has been a space that's been created that has allowed Reform over the recent months to be able to steal that march, which is interesting because whether it's on indefinite leave to remain, the ECHR, Kemi actually signalled all of that before Reform, and there's a political issue here, there's a timing issue that Reform jumped, hearing that Kemi was going to do these things to try and steal a march. Now, what I'm hoping to hear during the conference, and hopefully from Kemi as well, is that reflection and that piece of work that she's been doing over the last 12 months has now happened, and we start to pull our boots up, we pull our socks up, and we start to actually demonstrate to the public that we understand, we start to communicate better, and we start to outline what a positive Conservative Party can deliver for this country.
Okay, and Penny, very quickly, one thing you'd like to hear?
Well, politics is changing. The most important thing to the public is about delivery. They don't really care that it's a red cat, blue cat or turquoise cat. They want some mice courts, they want some boats stopped, and they want the NHS to work and to have more disposable income. Kemi understands that delivery, credibility and trust is everything.
OK, well, let's see what she has to say. And Lucy, we will talk about your campaign for the deputy leadership towards the end of the programme. But let's focus on the Conservatives for now, because in Manchester, the main event in the next few days is the Conservative conference. Kemi Badenoch is here with us and at the conference to try to settle the party's nerves, to impress more of you and give a clearer idea of what she stands for. The backdrop to the conference, of course, though, is the attacks this week. Ms Badenoch went to Heaton Park Synagogue yesterday, meeting the Mayor, Andy Burnham, there, and some of the police officers who were at the scene.
Walking down the street now as it is, it's completely empty. I know it would have been full of people. Hearing them describe the events of Thursday as they would have happened, someone being run over, a terrified community behind the door, elderly people and children pushing to stop the door from being opened, and then unfortunately, you know, 2 people losing their lives while trying to defend themselves. I think it's absolutely awful. This should not be happening in our country.
Well, welcome to our now very sunny studio in Salford. It's a busy few days for you ahead. Let's start with the government's proposals to limit some repeated protests. Will you back the Home Secretary in doing that?
Well, of course we will support them, but what took them so long? And the issue, from my perspective, is why should the public trust a Home Secretary who not that long ago was protesting herself, lay down, closed the Sainsbury's supermarket because it was stocking Israeli goods? I think what I heard when I was, talking to the congregation yesterday was that they don't trust this Labour government because they've seen all of them make many anti-Israeli remarks, support anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish action. They are very concerned that this government doesn't believe in them, but I want them to know that they can trust the Conservatives.
In terms, though, of your own position, you're also someone who's a very staunch defender of freedom of speech.
Yes, I am.
Is it comfortable as a Conservative to say that you will back further curbs on the right to protest?
We believe in free speech, but that has to be within the bounds of the law. If people are using protest to intimidate, if they are using protest to incite violence, then no, it's not protest.
What do you think it is then?
It's intimidation, it's inciting violence. This is one of the things that we've all been reminded of as we come to Tory conference, that what happened in Manchester was completely foreseeable. Not enough has been done. Jewish people have been very worried about their safety. I want them to know that we believe that they should be in this country. We do not want to see them leaving. Many of them told me that they're already leaving. Family members are leaving. They feel safer in Israel a war zone than they do in our country. How has it come to that? We have always provided sanctuary to Jews, and we always should.
Would you then commit today, for example, to accepting all of the recommendations that were put forward in the cross-party report by Penny Mordaunt and John Mann about things that could happen right now to tackle anti-Semitism? Would you back those proposals?
I think there's a lot in the report that I would support, but the key thing right now is to make sure that the government, we're the opposition, they are the government needs to actually stop proving to Jewish people that it's got their back. The recognition of Palestine when Hamas still had hostages sent a terrible signal to Jewish people in this country that the government did not care. I want them to know that we care. And as far as I'm concerned, no other party has pointed out so many of the issues. We are the only party with the experience, with the competence, with the credibility to deliver for our country, whether it's stronger borders, safety, or a stronger economy.
Do you agree with Penny Mordaunt that there are some institutions in this country, like unions, for example? Penny Mordaunt's claimed some of them are anti-Semitic. Do you agree with that?
Well, Penny and I were in government together, and she will remember that we actually tried to bring in a law, the boycotts, divestments and sanctions legislation, to stop many institutions, many government bodies from carrying out anti-Semitic behaviour. This is one of the things that we have been fighting for many years.
Teachers' unions, do you include them in that?
I don't want to start looking at union by union. I haven't listened to every single thing that everybody in the unions have said. I'm making a broad point that we need to make sure that our country is safer for Jews, and I believe that Conservatives are the only party that can do the very best for them. We want to work with Labour, but given that the Home Secretary herself was attending pro-Palestine protests, lying down in front of a Sainsbury's to close it because it was stocking Israeli goods, I think lots of people will expect a lot more.
OK, let's then turn to your conference. It's a very important few days for you and for your party, and you're trying to make a big splash with your plan to control the country's borders. You're promising you would remove 150,000 people who don't have permission to be here every year. That's the population of a city like Cambridge or a place like Blackpool. That's a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
You'd leave the European Convention on Human Rights in order to make it easier. But where on earth would they all go?
The fact is there are too many people in our country who should not be here. That is why today I'm going to be talking about that borders plan you just outlined. That's only one of the things that's in there. We need to leave the ECHR in order to do so. But people need to go back to their countries. They can go to safe third countries if that's the best thing for them. We had a Rwanda plan. We had a deterrent that was already working in terms of deterring people before it had even come into place.
Well, hang on. The evidence on that is disputed. And here's the point about Rwanda.
I'm sure people will dispute it, but the point is Labour scrapped it. They had no plan. They said they were going to smash the gangs, and crossings have increased 40% since they came in.
So where would you propose that 150,000 people would go? Because the original Rwanda plan was going to take perhaps 1,000 people over 5 years.
Laura,
so where would those people all go?
Not here. Not here. They do not belong here. They are committing crimes. They are hurting people. We have been trying to deport so many people and have been facing obstacles in the legal system. That's why we're leaving the ECHR. We tried to deport a Jamaican national who had committed crimes. Shabana Mahmood and Keir Starmer wrote a letter asking us not to deport him. He went on to kill someone else later. I'm tired of us asking all of these irrelevant questions about where should they go. They will go back to where they should do or another country, but they should not be here. We need to look after the people in our country.
But it's not irrelevant to say where would they go. That's a fundamentally important question.
The most relevant question is should they be here? If they should not be here, then they need to be removed.
And once you have concluded
the logical
that,
conclusion
you
of
have
what
to
you were saying,
say where they would
Laura, the logical conclusion of what you're saying is that let's just give up. Oh, it's just all too difficult. This is how we've got to this mess. We cannot have this attitude anymore. That is why we have come up with a credible plan. It's not going to be easy.
It's a credible plan.
But it is.
Tell us credibly where they would go.
I've answered that question.
No,
they will go back.
Told us where they would go.
They will go back to where they came from. That's what they need to do. We cannot have a situation where we can't deport people and say, well, we don't know where they go, so they can just stay here. That is basically inviting every single person across the world to our shores because we don't know where they would go afterwards.
So you think it would be feasible?
This is a fatalistic and defeatist attitude.
So you think,
and I I will not have that. We need to have stronger borders, and the Conservative Party has come up with a plan to do that. It is not just that 150,000. It is about banning asylum claims for people who've arrived here illegally. It is about making sure that we leave the ECHR. It is about the return scheme with visa sanctions. There's so much in there. The removals force will be funded by a lot of the money which comes from closing down asylum hotels. We need to make sure that we stop spending billions on people who should not be here and spend the billions on removing them from our country.
And you clearly feel very, very passionately
I do.
that people who don't have a right to be here shouldn't be here. And that is a unifying message from nearly every mainstream politician these days. But you say you have a credible plan. Tell us credibly how you are going to get 150,000 people every year to leave this country and go back to countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Eritrea. How are you going to make it happen?
They have come from all over the world. Voluntary returns do happen, but that is why we're having the removals force. We will be standing up a force that does not exist right now. And I've told you where the money is coming from. That is how you do it. But when I was in Epping talking to the families of children who have been hurt, one of them sexually assaulted, they are not interested in these sorts of questions. They want to know why government is failing them. It is not fair on people in our communities across the country to pay the price for this. It was not fair for all of those girls who had foreigners raping them in the grooming gangs to still be living in the community with their victims.
But the question,
that is not right.
But the question can be...
I have answered the question,
how
Laura.
you make things
with the removals force. That is the first R in our borders plan.
Let's talk then about your removals force. So you've said it would cost £1.6 billion, and you would pay for it by money saved from closing asylum hotels.
Among other things.
But isn't that a bit chicken and egg? Because you can't get the money from closing hotels until the people have all gone, but that's meant to pay for the removals force. So how does that work?
It's not chicken and egg. If you have a plan and you know that you will be making the savings, you can spend that money. We've identified where the money will be coming from. But right now, we have people in social housing. We're spending loads of money, not just on hotels, but asylum centres, all of the policing that goes around it. That Epping protest after that horrific sexual assault, that cost well over £1 million. We are spending all of our money on dealing with migration issues instead of the NHS, instead of education, instead of our police force. I want us to make sure that we can have stronger borders. I've come up with a plan to do it. It is not going to be easy. There is no simple, happy, warm words plan that's going to secure our borders. It has to be something tough. And what I'm not going to do is stick my head in the sand like Keir Starmer, who's too weak to deal with it. And I'm not just going to rush out with lots of random things like Reform are doing. We have given a credible plan.
And one of the things that you've come up with over a period of many months, I know you've been looking carefully at what has been a vexed issue for the Conservative Party for a long time, whether or not to stay in the European Convention on Human Rights. You've made that decision now, and you say you would leave if you were elected. You also say you'd be prepared to leave the Refugee Convention if there aren't changes to how it operates. But British values and democracy are under pressure internationally. Do you really want the UK to join only Russia and Belarus in quitting a decades-old European agreement? What message does that send?
America is not in that agreement.
It's
Australia is not
European
in that agreement. Canada is not in that agreement. You don't need to be in that convention to have human rights. Our human rights existed long before the ECHR, long before the Human Rights Act. We had rights in our common law. Parliament had legislated for this over centuries.
And you wouldn't be worried about the message that sends? Because some people in your party are worried about the message that it would send to walk away from such a treaty.
8 European countries, led by Italy, have gone to the Council of Europe and said the ECHR is a problem.
And they're looking at changing it, but that's different from
the Council of
leaving.
Europe. The Council of Europe has dismissed them. Okay, let's stop wasting time. People in our country are suffering and struggling. We are paying more and more money to deal with a problem that is getting worse and worse. We will do whatever it takes. It's not going to be easy. I'm not here to pretend that it's going to be easy. It is going to be difficult. That is why we took our time. We have a credible plan. We've explained how we will pay for it. We've got 200 pages of legal advice, very thorough, explaining what's happened. And we haven't said we're leaving the Refugee Convention, by the way.
You said you'd be prepared to leave, though I read your plans last night.
I have said that we will be prepared to leave anything that is stopping us from securing our borders. Conservatives are the only party with a strong team, not a one-man band, the experience, the credibility to be able to deliver this. And that is what we're going to be showing at our conference.
one of the other things that you announced in the run-up to conference is abolishing the Climate Change Act. And inside your party, not everyone has been happy. The former Prime Minister, Theresa May, said it would be a catastrophic mistake. Many businesses have been confused by it because part of the point of having a target in the Act has allowed businesses to plan, to invest in things like building wind turbines. They know what's coming. And you voted for it. Isn't it hopelessly short-term to get rid of that Act?
It's not working. If something's not working, you should stop it. Just because it says Climate Change Act doesn't mean it's stopping climate change. We made amendments to that Act to comply with the Paris Agreement. We are the only country in the world that is complying with the Paris Agreement. The carbon budgets that it set have forced us to have electric vehicle mandates, pushing them through very quickly. We are buying electric vehicles made by coal-fired power stations in China, the same coal-fired power stations we've closed down here. We are making other countries wealthy. Industry is leaving. We are losing oil and gas. We're losing ceramics. We're losing car manufacturing. We're losing farming. We're losing fishing. Everybody's talking about energy prices. We need to make sure that we do not bankrupt our country. I want people in this country to have jobs. People are losing their jobs. Unemployment has increased every single month since Labour came into office.
Well, it's fair to point out there are a lot of
businesses
who think that this would be a retrograde step. But let's talk about what this represents.
If it's not working, it is not retrograde. We have to do the right thing, not just cling to the past for sentimental reasons.
Let's talk about what these decisions, though, represent. I mean, you've already mentioned reform. They have for months been saying they'd quit the European Convention and they'd scrap climate change plans. And Ben Houghton was suggesting before they've moved quicker and shouted more loudly on these issues. And someone else in your party said to me, if you want a full fat Coke, you buy a full fat Coke. If you're interested in immigration, if you're interested in scrapping climate change plans, you're going to go for reform. You're not going to go for the Conservatives. They've stolen your thunder, haven't they?
What we're doing is making sure that we can take people with us. We're not just rushing out things and saying them to win elections or to win votes.
But while you were waiting, they've stolen your lunch, haven't they?
The election is not tomorrow. We have to make sure that we demonstrate that we're looking after people's lives. Reform rushed out announcements about ILR, partly copied from us. They hadn't done the actual work, and all of a sudden, lots of Europeans with settled status didn't know what was going to happen to them. I make sure that when I announce something, I think about how it's going to impact people, not just saying things so we can grab a few votes.
And the general
winning elections, if I may just make this point, it's very crucial. Winning elections without a plan is what got us into trouble. It's why Labour is floundering. They don't know what to do. And that is what reform will deliver. I said I wanted to do politics differently. That's why I won the leadership contest of the Conservative Party. And doing it differently means being patient, taking our time to get it right, not just to say what people want to hear and then get it wrong later. I will not do that.
But that has left you floundering in the polls in a worse position than when you took the job. And if you look, even since the council elections in May, which were pretty disastrous for your party, you've lost 100 councillors in local elections that have happened since May. It's not working for you.
It will pay off. Nothing good comes quickly or fast. It will pay off. I'm an engineer, and the way that I was taught to do things is you have a plan, you work it through. It's not about being the first to announce a policy, it's about having the best policy. That is what I'm offering. And yes, there may have been a small political price to pay in the polls. It will pay off eventually. What we cannot have is more and more of the same failed politics of people just rushing out, not knowing what they're doing, saying whatever, and then making a mess of people's lives. But the people who suffer are all those people watching this programme who think they're voting for something that hasn't been thought through.
But you admit what they will know with the Conservatives. Price to pay. And this is
there has been a small immediate price to pay. But what I want your viewers to know is that we have a plan that will deliver that stronger economy and those stronger borders which they want to see. Not an announcement, an actual plan.
But it was your decision to take the time to hang back, and during that period,
take the time to work through a plan, not hanging back.
But while you have been working out exactly what you wanted to do, the Conservative Party's position, which was already dreadful, has got worse.
Laura, polls are not elections.
But I need to ask.
The fact is, if I had rushed out and said all those things right at the beginning, people would have said, why should we believe you? Why have you suddenly changed? Simply saying something doesn't mean you're going to be fine in the polls. What you're saying is a counterfactual. You don't know that if I had rushed out all those things right at the beginning that we would be doing well. You have no idea. What I'm doing is being very consistent, saying Vote for me. We will get through this. We're going to think it through. We're going to have very clear, credible plans. They're not going to fall apart the minute someone asks a question like you get with reform. And we're not going to waste our time in opposition like Labour did. They had 14 years in opposition. They've got nothing.
And
the Prime Minister is weak. He's lost his Deputy Prime Minister. They're having rows. Lucy's here to promote herself for the Deputy leadership. This week is about Manchester, and I'm here to push our message.
You are here to persuade your party of your plans, and you're also here to persuade many people in your party, actually, that you are the right person for this job. And we're going to close by asking a question that we asked of the Prime Minister last week, who also has detractors in his own ranks. What if the problem is you?
The fact is, I was elected to do exactly what I am doing now. And I think Conservative Party members are going to keep their faith in me.
And if things go terribly and you fall backwards at the elections in May, will you resign?
I have said that I'm the person who was elected to deliver exactly as I'm doing now. We've come out with new policies. We have shown that we've done the hard work. We're not going to waste our time in opposition. But the fact of the matter is that we're the only party that can deliver both a stronger economy and stronger borders.
OK, Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed for being with us on the first day of your conference. It'll be a busy few days for you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Well then, Ben, you threw down the gauntlet. You said you had to hear more. The party had to pull its socks up and get on with it. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, more of that, please. That's exactly the work that needs to be done. And now it's about how do we accelerate that. So if we start to see these plans, and we talked a lot there about, obviously, the migration plans and obviously the illegal immigration, the deportation force. But the other part of this conference, which I'm hoping to hear more about over the coming days, is the economy as well. So we all know migration is going to play a big role in our politics for years to come. But going into the autumn and going into the budget in November, I think Kemi might be onto something around really trying to put the economy back right at the centre of this, because Labour really don't have a plan over the economy, and we've seen them lose control over the last 12 months. Reform attacking even further to the left because they see an opportunity to park their tanks on the lawns economically.
Is it, though, credible, Penny, for Kemi Badenoch to say 150,000 people a year will go back to the countries that they came from? Because if I remember correctly, every government ever has said that about people who don't have permission to be in this country. And I don't recall a single government who's got good at actually making that happen.
Well, that is what Kemi's talking about. She's talking about having done that work, because the announcements...
But is it credible? Because she didn't dare give us detailed plans of how she would do it.
The announcements coming this week, as you'll have seen from the press release, they are about changing the law, which has got the headlines, but it's also about the operational issues that sit behind that. But the third element you need to get this to work is political will. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, the one thing he has shown is that politicians can still make things happen. The work that he has done in the US with ICE, which is one of the things that Kemi's plans are based on, has actually turned the tide of illegal migration. And I think you've got a very clear message today that Kemi Badenoch has the political will to do this. What she is doing is not easy. She could have taken an easier route. She's not doing it because she knows her responsibilities to this country.
OK, well, we'll see what happens in the next few days. And there are lots of people in this country who look at what's happened in America and they think, actually, I don't fancy that. But it is a controversial position, and no doubt there'll be vigorous debate in the next few days. Lucy, I imagine that you were not very impressed by what you heard from Kemi Badenoch, but I do want to talk to you about this deputy leadership candidate campaign in the Labour Party. Your rival, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, implied that you would put Labour back on the road to opposition. She said you'd encourage division and disunity. Is she right?
No, she's not right. I think that's a slightly ridiculous claim to make.
Ridiculous?
I want this government to succeed, absolutely, and I've worked incredibly hard and loyally as a Labour frontbencher and member of the government for the last few months as well. But I think we can be more successful if we are a better version of ourselves, if we draw in all the voices from our broad movement that are connected to our communities. We'll make better decisions, because we can't sugarcoat this. We can't just pretend everything's going great and what we need is just more of the same.
But how do you
we
make
do
better
need a bit of a course correction. I will do that inside the family where I can. I'm not going to snipe from the sidelines, but I think I can help the Labour government to reach back to its communities, back through its movement, which is our great strength, to make sure we're including those broad voices.
But how do you look more effective to the country if you've got more public disagreement. The former Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, who was with us last week, he said actually having a deputy leader who's not in the cabinet, who's not part of the leadership team, actually that would be very destabilising. He said that her candidature, talking about you, would be bound to destabilise the leadership.
Well, first of all, this is a party role. This is not a government role. It's elected directly by the members. It's their choice. They get to decide. Whether it's me or whether it's Bridget, neither of us are going to be Deputy Prime Minister because David Lammy is Deputy Prime Minister and the government doesn't recognise. It is about unity, but unity cuts both ways and it comes from our strength. And I think when you have a narrower and narrower group of people making decisions that are not connected to the communities that we're here to serve, that's when mistakes are made. And I think that we've got to tell a much stronger story about the purpose of this Labour government. Whose side are we on? In whose interests are we governing? And I think I can really help the Labour government to do that. And I'll do that full time, yeah. Not in the cabinet. I'll be in the political cabinet. I'll have lots of political influence outside of that as well. But offering that voice of members around the table and making sure I do that full time. And judge me by my actions. I haven't come out since being dismissed from the government a few weeks ago, throwing bricks at people and swinging. The only one who's being divisive in this campaign, actually, are people like Alan Johnson, who just keep going on about me all the time.
You've drawn attention, though, in this race to issues like the two-child benefit cap. And, of course, the government got into terrible trouble over its welfare reforms.
Absolutely.
I just wonder, if you win the deputy leadership race, would you be willing to vote against the government if you think they're doing the wrong thing?
Well, I've actually don't think I've ever broken the whip because I'm quite loyal. But I'm going to make sure we make much better decisions and that we stick to our manifesto pledges, that we're really clear about the principles of this Labour government. And yes, that means things like the two-child benefit cap, which I want to see lifted. I want to see that lifted urgently because I think that speaks to who we are, what our values are, and we get these things
right. But go on,
right.
Yes or no? If you were deputy leader, would you?
I'm not going to go into hypotheticals, but I want this government to succeed, and I'm not going to be out there sniping and throwing bricks, absolutely not. But I'm going to be making sure that we hear the voices of our whole broad movement, our communities, and we're a better government because of it.
All three of you, thank you so much indeed for being with us today. Thank you to you, of course, for spending Sunday morning with us on an important day. Politicians are grappling with what might seem impossible questions right now. Maybe some of us are too. Join me and Paddy O'Connell later on Sunday's newscast on BBC Sounds, and I'll see you next week from our normal spot, same time, same place.